Morning, everybody. We'll get started in a minute. We'll get started in a little bit. Hopefully this isn't like the real tax credit conference where everyone stands in the hall saying hello to everyone they haven't seen in a long time and being really loud as the panel. And so I guess that's an advantage here, is we can avoid that interruption. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is Erica Sims. I'm with Housing Forward Virginia, and our panel today is called Securing the Land. And we have 4 very experienced affordable housing developers that are going to talk to us about their experience and give advice on how we can continue innovating and succeeding at challenging acquisitions. So we know we are all in a recession, but no one has really let the real estate industry know that. And our panelists today are going to help us hone our creativity and still continue to try to get deals done in this environment. We're going to hear from each panelist about specific deals they've been working on and really focus in on the unique acquisition arrangements. And after the presentations, we'll open it up for about a 25 to 30-minute conversation. So feel free to start including your questions in the Q&A box for that time. So to start us off, Nick Bracco is going to do the first presentation. He serves as Regional Vice President of the Mid-Atlantic region for Michaels Development Affordable. And as Regional Vice President, Nick is currently overseeing the development or acquisition of 12 projects totaling 2,000 units and $500 million across Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And we know that churches and their land portfolios are a key source of affordable housing inventory. And so Nick is going to kick off our presentations today with an overview of a deal that is a partnership with a faith-based organization. All right, I'll leave it to you, Nick.
All right, can everybody hear me okay? Excellent. So good morning, still about 12 more minutes. So good morning, everybody. My name is Nick Bracco. I am Regional Vice President of Michaels Affordable here in Alexandria, Virginia. I head up the Mid-Atlantic region, which is DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And as Erica mentioned, I wanted to tell you folks a bit about our Angel Place Apartments transaction, which is a partnership with both a church and their subsidiary development company. So if we could go to the next slide. So just really quickly about Michaels, in case you haven't heard from us, we are a national owner operator of affordable and workforce housing. We have regional offices as far west as Honolulu, Hawaii, and as far east as the US Virgin Islands, and kind of everywhere in between. A couple of numbers that are on the screen here, the 2 that I think matter to most of us on the Michaels team are the 145,000 residents who call our communities home every day, and the $8 million in scholarships that we have been able to provide to our residents over the past several years through our owner Mike Levitt's scholarship fund. So next slide. So just after a bit of a layoff, we are working back in the Commonwealth again. We're excited to be doing so. We're working with the Richmond Housing Authority on the RAD redevelopment of several of their properties across Richmond, and in Fairfax County on an affordable senior deal, as well as in Arlington, Virginia on a market rate property that we're excited about. So we look forward to kind of crossing paths with many of you out there as we look to increase our footprint in the Commonwealth in the coming years. So enough about the commercial, let's talk about the deal. Ainger Place is a 72 unit property targeted at families earning between 30% and 60% of the area median income. It's located in Ward 8 in the District of Columbia. For those of you who are familiar with that part of the world, it's kind of the corner of Ainger and Alabama, southeast. It was, from a capital stack perspective, funded with 4% credits, 221D4, Housing Production Trust Fund dollars from the District of Columbia, as well as a seller's note, which is a pretty common financing structure in the district. The property does contain 1, 2, and 3 bedrooms. We were able to facilitate 18 permanent supportive housing units at the property. And also, as the slide shows, we set up a long-term ground lease with a capitalized payment and a joint venture with this development subsidiary that allowed us to share fees with our partner there. So a few years back, probably half a dozen years back by now, we were approached, or Michaels was approached by Ainger Place Development Corporation, which is the subsidiary I was referring to, about what could be done with their 2-acre parcel, which is shown here in kind of the bluish color. The yellowish color is the church site itself. So there was an existing 24-unit property that was more or less at the end of its useful life, and the church leaders and the folks at APDC wanted to see what could be done with their property. So I think they reached out to a couple of different developers. Michaels was ultimately selected, and we worked with them to develop this plan, and ultimately the 72-unit property you see kind of with the white roof there today. The way we were able to, so we had the one benefit that they already had a property on the site, that they were looking to improve upon that. And we built on that through the creation of this joint venture, where we brought in the 501c3 group from the church, which, for those of you who don't know, in the District of Columbia, you can structure your transaction to get a tax abatement if there's 501c3 involvement. So that was a great aligning of our kind of resources and what we each brought to the table. Additionally, with the long-term ground lease, we were able to then create this capitalized payment to provide additional cash to the church to help them with some things they needed to get done around their property and programs they wanted to get started with. So that's kind of the overview. We can talk more about it in the kind of Q&A if you have any questions, but I did have, I think, one more slide where I wanted to talk briefly about the 3 things that I think we've learned, and we are learning as we go through this, that are helpful when trying to do these faith-based partnerships. And the first is to align motivations, right? We've with the various folks we've talked to, typically when we're going to a faith-based organization, they're not interested in us building an office building, right? They want to know that they're going to have a long-lasting legacy in the community. So it works pretty well for us on the affordable side to do something that is going to benefit the community as well. The second is be straightforward on timelines. We've time and time again spoken to folks and have heard developer A, B, or C said they can do this in 18 months, and there's no way that's going to happen in 18 months. So if you think something might take 24 or 36 or 5 years, like some of these affordable transactions can take, it's important to be upfront with them, and it'll help you avoid kind of those conflicts down the road. And the last topic here to just briefly touch on is look for shared benefits in ways that you can kind of, through the creation of your physical environment, do something that is going to be beneficial to the faith-based organization. Frequently we see buildings being built with churches or large community centers or shared parking lots or anything of that sort. So those are the 3 main takeaways on things as we're looking at faith-based properties and how we can kind of partner up with them and create long-term value for both them and build additional affordable housing. So with that, I'll turn it over to, I think, Camilla, right?
Great. Thank you, Nick.
Sure.
Yeah, let me just introduce Camilla McAfee, which I'm sure needs no introduction, but she joined Wesley Housing in 2008 and currently serves as Director of Real Estate Development, where she directs and manages the affordable housing pipeline. And before joining Wesley, she served as a development associate with Forest City, Washington, as well as a Director of Public Finance at the District of Columbia Housing Finance Agency. And the deal that Camilla will focus on today is something that she worked on in Arlington with a single asset entity. So thank you so much, Camilla. Take it away.
Thanks, Erica, for the intro. Hi, good after. Oh no, I still have 5 minutes before the afternoon. Good morning still. You can go to the next slide. Just a quick overview for those of you who may not be familiar with Wesley Housing. We are a 46-year-old nonprofit affordable housing developer. We're a regional housing developer, not national, and so our numbers are a bit smaller than Michael's, but still impactful. Most of our portfolios in Northern Virginia. We entered the DC market about 4 years ago as well. Over our history, we've developed about 35 communities, generating about 2,300 housing units. We pride ourselves in having been involved in a lot of a variety of projects, from small special needs projects, small group homes for folks living with AIDS and other special needs, senior housing, to large scale, 200 unit high-rise elevator buildings such as Culpeper Garden that I'm going to speak to. We currently have about 550 units under active development, site control, and financing committed. And again, we have a specialty in independent senior living communities such as Culpeper. Go to the next slide. So again, the focus is on opportunities existing with single asset sponsors. So specifically, I'm speaking of some of the community development corporations and other localized nonprofits who may own one or more affordable housing properties in a given community. Many of them, as most of you know, have evolved out of some of the social justice initiatives in the 60s and 70s, and they utilize a lot of housing programs that came on the books at that time. So speaking about 236, 202, and a lot of those programs were meant to promote more privatization of affordable housing and expand opportunities for those who had historically been left out. And some of these CDCs even evolved out of some of the faith-based initiatives, that Nick has talked about and that folks are refocusing on now. So many of them, there's been a focus on some of these properties, certainly in the early 2000s, because a lot of them were coming out of their original and some extended contracts at that time. And many of the housing advocates and local governments have been and are starting to refocus efforts on preservation, and develop a lot of databases that have some of the information about those expiring contracts. There is a National Housing Preservation Database, for instance. I believe DC keeps their own preservation database, and others continue to develop and track those, because as we know, as much as we need to produce affordable housing, we certainly need to preserve what we have. So there's a tremendous opportunity there for that, housing preservation on these sites. And then again, many of them, since they were developed in the 70s, maybe the 80s, under prior zoning laws, they may have the opportunity for additional production on those sites. And we've seen that occur in a number of properties. Many of the sponsors, they're well established and well regarded in their communities, and because of that, that can foster a lot of tremendous local support for entitlements. If you are able to get increased density on the site and other necessary approvals, and can combat some of the NIMBYism, right? NIMBYism is usually born out of people not wanting to change the existing state. And so if there is an existing asset there operating well, then maybe you get a little bit less pushback about expanding that effort. Many of these owners also, they are lending a lot of supportive services, providing resident services, such as the situation with Culpeper Garden that I'll speak a little more about. And so that's one of those shared benefits that Nick talked about, bringing your expertise and the things that you do well to a good partnership. And then it's a great ability to leverage an existing asset, right? Recapitalizing, releveraging an existing asset that may be in the later term of their mortgage, and you're able to capture and recapture some of that equity, and leverage that into incorporating a seller note into the property, so you're selling it from an existing ownership entity to the new, but keeping the equity with the project and exhibiting that leveraging, and possibly maybe pre-development lending or other opportunities to be creative to capitalize on that equity. Go to the next slide. So again, the case I'm talking about is Culpeper Garden. This 210 unit property was originally built by the Arlington Retirement Housing Corporation, ARHC, which is an offshoot of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Arlington. Again, born out of a faith-based initiative. They have an interesting history that where they got the land from is not is similar in origin to Wesley Housing in our first project. One of, I believe, a church member in this case, in our case, it was a church member or someone who supported the church, donated the land to the property. For Culpeper, for Wesley, it was a donation. Culpeper was a below market price, but nonetheless, a form of donation of a 5-acre site for the development of affordable senior housing, which, again, was seen as a critical need and a social justice initiative in Arlington at the time. The Culpeper 1, again, was built in '75, and there were a couple of other add-ons to the property, Culpeper 2 and Culpeper 3, and 2 is another independent senior living project, and Culpeper 3 was actually a unique property at the time, being the first assisted living facility built in Arlington. And in 2015, the ARHC went through an RFP process to secure a development partner to help them meet the goals of addressing a lot of the deferred maintenance at Culpeper. They wanted to expand some of the affordability levels, of course, improve operations in order to better serve their residents, provide some cash flow to be able to do additional resident services. And so they selected Wesley to be their development partner for that effort. Go to the next slide. So we did just that, right? So we increased the long-term affordability set-asides. Previously, the project was only set aside at 60 and 80% of AMI under its former 236 financing. We reduced those long-term commitments to 30, 40, 50, and 60% levels. We were able to secure HUD tenant protection vouchers, project-based tenant protection vouchers, to ensure that the existing residents weren't paying any more than 30% of their AMI, and as well for future residents of the property. We conducted a comprehensive partially tenant in place rehab. We were moving residents around the building. We're doing major systems replacements in tiers of units, and invested roughly $115,000 a unit in order to do that. So this was another tax-exempt bond 4% deal. We're proud to be able to have generated that much investment into the property to improve mechanical, electrical, plumbing systems, increased the fire protection systems, sprinklers, and added a lot of accessibility improvements that were consistent with universal design principles. You can go to the next slide. And so, of course, as this tenant in place senior rehab, you can imagine there were some impacts. In March, we were about 90% complete with construction on the property, a 2-year project. We closed in 2018, we were hitting 90%. We were running ahead of schedule, rounding third base here, and COVID hit. Even though the governor didn't shut down construction activities in the Commonwealth, we did make an owner decision to stop work for a period of time, in order to reevaluate and establish some COVID appropriate protocols with the consultancy of an industrial hygienist, and really did that because obviously we're dealing with a very vulnerable population. And today, Wesley and ARHC are happy and proud to say that we have, to date, and fingers crossed, we have no COVID cases amongst the residents there. You can imagine, beyond hitting that construction completion benchmark, it also challenges us to meet all of our financial performance-based metrics and deadlines that we have with the lenders and investors. We were helped by the fact that we were running ahead of schedule, However, we made that mutual, mission-based commitment to, really prioritize the health and safety of our residents above anything else, to kind of establish those protocols, slow construction down effectively by doing that. And we did finally reach completion in September. Let's see. So you can go to the next slide. So again, just to wrap up here, partnership relationships, bringing, good partnerships bring their strengths and they're complementary to one another, right? We all know that, the yin and the yang, right? And some additional considerations as you're establishing those partnership relationships, is figuring out those development roles and responsibilities, as it relates to the work that's to be done, but also as well to the expenses and fees that are to be carried and provided. So those are decision points, and relevantly, operationally, you have the same thing in terms of cash flow splits, asset management, who's doing what, who's responsible for what. And then a strong consideration will be the exit. So in many of these cases, these single asset entities are going into partnership with an experienced developer because they need our expertise in order to get the transactional financing done, sometimes the management, so forth. But yet they want to retain control. So they have to, give up a lot of control during the tax credit period, because that's what the investor is going to require and expect to deliver on guarantees and the like and performance. But then they may want a right of first refusal on the back end in year 15. So that's another consideration you have to think about. So that concludes my presentation, and we can delve into more questions later. Thank you.
Thank you, Camilla. I think it's really interesting that both the deal that you and Nick mentioned, you received through RFP responses. So I'll be curious to see if Jason and Carmen have a little bit the same or a different situation as far as their acquisitions. So I'm going to turn it over next to Jason Duguay, who has worked for SCG Development for 11 years and is currently Vice President of Development, responsible for acquisition and development of affordable housing projects, including all aspects from inception to lease up. And he's closed over 30 projects in 10 states with a total development cost of over $600 million. And today, Jason is going to share with us a number of SCG deals that he's worked on that are focused on innovative acquisition arrangements. So Jason.
Thank you, Erica. I guess I'm the first one to get to say it. Good afternoon. You see there is our kind of commercial slide at the beginning. She covered some of this stuff, but this is a snapshot of SCG Development and our sister company, Stratford Capital Group. Obviously, as on the syndication side included, we're involved in 27 states. More locally here in our Virginia office on the development side, we are active in 12 states, mostly up and down the East Coast, as far west as Aspen, Colorado, as far south as Miami Beach, Florida. But sort of one of our strategies, in the last 5 or 6 years, is to focus more locally here in the DMV, where the need for affordable housing is, as bad as it is anywhere in the country. And to that end, as everyone knows, the land here in the DMV is, it's extremely competitive, especially to try and find one that works for an affordable housing deal. And so if you can go to the next slide. Sort of instead of talking about a specific deal, I think sort of I'm addressing our general strategy is how to identify parcels that can be developed into affordable housing. And sort of, there's our sort of, it looks like a mission statement, but it's basically identify existing landowners with a need or requirement for affordable housing and provide expertise, experience to fulfill the need. And that's sort of our general approach to how we identify sites. We do, to your point, we do respond to RFPs. We are successful here and there, but sort of in this market for this new construction, high quality kind of look and feel market rate stuff, our experience and success has been in the form of finding folks who are either required by whatever proffer to deliver affordable housing, are either mission driven nonprofits or trusts in our example, and or our best cases to date have been with a local housing authority here in Fairfax specifically. with their, I guess, the land that they contribute to the projects, and then trying to find ways to creatively get them financed within. So the first slide is an example of a deal with the housing authority where we also, I'm gonna go to the next slide, Eric. This is our One University site. Adjacent to GMU, across from the field house. There's some existing older housing stock there. It's low density that we're redeveloping with a market rate development partner. We're handling the 240 units of affordable apartments, 120 senior and 120, or it's actually a little bit, that's switched a little bit, but it's family and senior at this point. And then our market rate partner is developing 333 units of student housing. The way we structured that, and this is again back to the need that FCRHA has land, the county has land, they kind of have their mission is to deliver affordable housing, but at the same time, one of the missions of most housing authorities and municipalities is also to generate revenue. So in this instance, we went out to a market rate developer who could afford to, provide that revenue in the form, in this case, it's in the form of a ground lease, but they're essentially partnering with us. They're providing the economics to the landowner, essentially subsidizing the affordable deal for the new construction project. This one will be on a 99-year ground lease with the county. As noted, payments come from the market rate developer. It's a 9-4 twin, and we hope that we're going to close it middle to the end of next year. I'm not going to be able to go into as much detail on each deal as Nick and Camilla, but we can do it in Q&A to get through all three of them. So you can go to the next slide. All right, this is project in Herndon. It's kind of the most near and dear to my heart at this point because we're trying to close it in the next 2 weeks, and actually just got off a closing call before this. This is part of a master plan site with a trust that's developing market rate for sale, eventually kind of higher density retail. It's directly adjacent to the Dulles Toll Road. There's a picture there. It's not oriented correctly, but north is to the right. That's the Dulles Toll Road, part of a larger mixed use. This one we've been at, when we started this one in 2017, when we're all said and done, it's like all these other affordable projects, which Nick did mention, it takes time. I mean, we're talking starting in 2017 and probably stabilizing in 2023. So 6 years. These larger new construction projects, some other things to point out, you have to be cognizant of when you're part of a master plan that all of the approvals take a long time. And as part of the approvals of the larger master plan sites, I mean, it's kind of a battle. And to deliver new construction, high quality, that looks and feels like market, that's kind of what you're signing up for. Not to mention they're expensive to do, obviously, from pre-development costs to get done. This deal, we were able to include a range from 30 to 60% of AMI. It's 100% affordable. We do have some subsidy in the form of vouchers from the state and from FCRHA. So there's assisted units in there. And this is a corridor that we would love to see more. I mean, as everyone knows, this Reston-Herndon corridor with all of the tech companies and all of the employment and all of the housing stock that's going to be needed and is being built. I mean, this is one area that, as far as Redburn goes, I mean, it doesn't get much worse than that here. So it needs affordable housing, and we're excited to be part of that. Again, we can go into more detail with Q&A. So you can go to the next slide. And this is an example of just this is a strategy that's more general than, we have had success. This is a project across the river in Maryland that we partnered with a market rate developer to build. But just generally speaking, I mean, we see a lot of opportunity there are a lot of larger market rate developers in the DMV that have large tracts of land that are master planned, that are required through proffer for ADU, WD requirements. And sort of one of our strategies over the last few years, and we've had lots of discussions with market rate developers, is finding a way to help them satisfy that need. Our general takeaway from the market rate folks is they don't want to deal with affordable housing finance, and to the extent we can help them get it done, put it on their site and meet their requirements, they're happy to have us. So, I mean, this example was done with a home builder / apartment and larger master developer. It's adjacent to the Shady Grove Metro Station. This one was financed with 4% credits and a subsidy from Montgomery County, and has the same range of incomes from 30 to 60% of the AMI. generally, and I wasn't going to bring this up, but I did want to point out one more thing because I don't think it's any of the panelists are going to discuss it. But the other topic, I don't have a slide for it, but sort of this, a good thing to discuss in Q&A if it's not already going to be brought up, is sort of this conversion of market office to residential. You keep hearing more and more about it, and just this morning I just happened to stumble across an article in Oakton on the that Flint Hill site, which is a large office park that's being redeveloped into apartments. I mean, you hear about it kind of here and there, but as the sort of the shift happens and market demand, or the demand for commercial and office keeps going down, and the demand for housing continues to climb. I mean, we're at 20% vacancy in office in the Tysons market. I mean, there's an inflection point where the demand for housing is going to get to the point where it just makes sense to convert a lot of these into apartments, and the price point to do that versus building new construction, kind of adaptive reuse, is going to start to make a lot of sense. I think that was my last slide. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Jason. That's a really good, interesting point. I hope we get to take that up in the conversation. So the last presentation is from Carmen Romero, the Vice President of Real Estate Development at Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing. And she leads development efforts for APA's portfolio and oversees the real estate development team. Particularly relevant to this panel, she led the public-private partnership to develop Gilliam Place, which was a faith-based organization partnership for 173 units of housing. But today, Carmen is going to be focusing on a project she's working on right now in Arlington County. So I'll hand it over to Carmen.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. First, my commercial on APA, for those of you who don't know us, we're a 31-year-old nonprofit affordable housing developer. And we are equally committed to both development as well as policy work, advocating with and for our low-income residents. We own 1,800 rental homes that are open today at 18 properties with 1,000 units in development and 450 million in assets. 10% of our units are set aside for permanent supportive housing partnerships. And to date, most people, our name, Arlington Partnership for Affordable Housing, our mission has been mostly to serve within Arlington, but in our 2017 strategic plan, our board, wanted to step up. This is a regional problem. How do we help solve and create affordable housing throughout the DMV region? And we have 4 deals under construction by year end this year, 2 of which are in Arlington, but one we just broke ground on in Loudoun County, and we break ground in Silver Spring in the next 2 weeks. So we're very excited about that. If you want to go to the next slide. And we're here today to talk about a partnership we are underway with in Arlington with the American Legion Post 139. It's a 1.3 acre site in the heart of that Clarendon, Virginia Square metro area in Arlington. And the focus of the panel is creative land deals, and it's extremely hard to find land. That's our biggest obstacle to creating affordable housing in the DMV. And I think especially in Arlington, especially after the announcement of Amazon HQ2, finding land, especially in this RB corridor, the Roslyn-Ballston corridor, has always been a challenge for APA. And here we did respond to an RFP. They'd hired a broker to represent them. There were 8 parties who submitted, and APA won that competition. I think, it was, the membership there realized that they had a facility in urgent need of costly repairs and upgrades. They needed to reimagine themselves. And then what we saw in the opportunity was really, how do we create models? I mean, we knew there were 200 American Legion posts in the state of Virginia alone. So we approached the RFP very much from, don't just sell your land and use your money to buy a site somewhere else. Come back and partner with APA and re-envision a model for American Legions all over the country. American Legion as a service organization is celebrating their 100th year next year. So they really like that. So, to us, it's really hard to win RFPs, but if you really think about it from alignment of mission, which is something that other panelists have talked about before, you actually have a shot. Because if you just try to compete on money and on time, us as affordable housing developers aren't going to win those competitions. Next slide, please. So this is our rendering of our vision. it's 160 rental homes, all of which are affordable. A lot of family size units, 2 and 3 bedrooms. You have 25 3 bedrooms, 87 2-bedroom units. And one thing that we're really proud of, for the first time ever in the Commonwealth of Virginia, we're going to have 50% of those units set aside with a veteran's preference. So if you've served your country, you're going to go to the top of that wait list. And whenever we open up a property in Arlington, a couple hundred units, you can expect 2,000 people are going to show up to get those units. They're in high demand. So that veteran's preference it was something that the Legion was really excited about. We, also wanted to show them that this does exist successfully in other parts. So NEF, who is a syndicator of credits on this deal, actually came in early when they heard that APA had this site under contract through a board member of APA, Bobby Rosen, who knew of NEF's Bring It Homes initiative at a national level, that veterans projects exist all over the country. So we got the post commander, the American Legion post commander, to take a road trip with us, and we went to Connecticut and New York and visited 3 veterans affordable housing projects and had a chance to really meet and get to know some of the residents and the management at some of these properties. And the programs they were able to do, the communities they were able to build, really cemented that partnership between us and the Legion to see this happen here in the Commonwealth. It's near transit, it's a 1-level parking garage. In Arlington now, you can get down to, 0.1 ratios, one parking spot for every 10 apartments, because of the wonderful transit we have. And hopefully post-pandemic, we'll be able to all get back to that car-free diet mode. But the other thing we're doing here that I think is more and more of a trend is co-location. A lot of these mission partners don't necessarily want to leave the community, but they have an aging facility and they want to monetize their land. So how do we as developers secure that parcel? Well, it's by pushing ourselves to do things we haven't done before. And in this case, we are turnkeying for them a first level new 5,000 square foot American Legion, where they are going to come back to this site. If you go to the next slide, you've got some renderings of what this looks like. And we also are going to commit to best in class resident services that especially cater to hopefully our veteran population that's going to move in, including talking to partners that can do mental health services, workforce development, right? When you're getting out of military service, how are you going to translate those skills into jobs in the market? Education, family support. Maybe you have PTSD, maybe you need some counseling partnerships where you can bring people into the property to offer those services on site, as well as computer labs and others. And those are some of the renderings. We're working with an interior designer who's actually a woman-owned veteran business based out of the district that we're very excited about. Next slide. And then these are just some pictures of some of the open space. It's a 1.3 acre site, so not a ton of green space, but we do what we can to tuck in some quiet contemplative spaces throughout the property. If you go ahead. This is the American Legion Post, their entrance to their 5,000 square foot new home. And this is just a visual of what others on the panelists have been talking about. It's 4 years to get to a construction start. These are tough projects, especially when you have to go through a change in the general land use plan to take something that was just a 1-story commercial to be multifamily, 7-story building. In places like Arlington and places like Fairfax, and I'm sure throughout the Commonwealth, that is a multi-step, expensive and long process. And unfortunately, like Camilla, by the time we came back to break ground, we were in the midst of COVID. So, it was very chaotic. We were part of the first bond issuance that got done post-COVID. And I know I see Jennifer McCarthy is one of the participants. So thank God for VHDA and their steadfast support of affordable housing and helping us get that done back in March. But it was really all hands on deck. And I really have to commend NEF and Cap One, our investor, and our other funders who, it was a tough closing, but we were all committed and we were really only 2 weeks off of our target date, despite all the chaos in the market in the spring of this year. If you go one past, and this is my last slide, but this was an all hands on deck effort to get this $77.4 million project funded. And there's some things that are unique about this capital stack. starting at the bottom, we were very fortunate to win the $700,000 Housing Trust Fund Award for this project. It's a critical element of this project. The county, Arlington County, was pushing us on getting new sources. They're like every other municipality, they have a lot of demands on their funding. So the more we can bring in other money to leverage county money, the more compelling it is to move a project like this forward. So really grateful for that support. We also had the American Legion, who gave us a $2 million seller note. So they got to monetize their land. They're going to use about $3.5 million of their sources to build themselves a new home, but the value of their land was much closer to $9 million. So they're building a new home, a cash endowment, and then they're lending the project of residual receipts below market rate seller note. That's the direct offset to, again, the Arlington County Trust Fund money, because it comes in just like AHIF, the county money does. So not hard pay. So really deep, deep commitment on the part of the Legion to see this project move forward. And then the final thing that we've never done before, you see at the top of the stack, which was run a capital campaign. And our goal was initially $2 million. But we were able to raise over $4 million towards the capital needed for this project, including a $1.5 million naming gift from Ron Twilliger. It's now called Twilliger Place. As you know, Mr. Twilliger is, very well known in the real estate industry. He's also a veteran, and he grew up in Arlington. So when he heard about what we were trying to do here, kind of bringing all these things together, he really generously stepped up. Amazon is also part of this. This was, we received a gift from them as well towards the project and towards that philanthropic campaign. It's not one that we'll be able to do on every project, but I do think it's important for us to try to see how we get the private market to be part of the capital solutions to building affordable housing and to leverage our state and local funds. And again, thanks for the opportunity and look forward to being part of the discussion.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you so much, all four of you. Those were really, really interesting deals and really hard deals that I'm sure you're all very proud of. I'm going to open it to some of the great questions we've gotten in the chat. So the first one is directed mostly to Jason, but I think all four of you have focused in on this issue of how long these deals take. And so, Jason, I hope you can speak to this a little bit, but others can chime in as well about whether that's something unique, that there's like a uniquely more lengthy time for deal development when you're talking about these structures. But the question particularly for Jason is around what would speed up the process in a county like Fairfax. And this questioner notes that at a recent Board of Supervisors committee meeting in the county, there was a recommendation that every future county and school capital improvement project begin with an exploration of ADUs, WDUs, or other special need housing. And so this questioner is asking, do you think that would be part of expediting a process for some of these master plan developments?
Sure. So, when I first started hearing that question, the new construction stuff in these types of areas, the longer lead time stuff, the landowner aside and how long things can take working out into their master plan and sort of negotiating your deal. The actual entitlement zoning process is what it is, but I think it sounds like in the second sentence was about ADU, WDU requirements. And I would say sort of the mantra that I would take just basically is flexibility for ADU and WDU. There is rules in place that sometimes kind of seem to be tripping folks up, especially on the market rate side, just sort of in what requirements. And it does sound like there are plenty of discussions that are having taken place already and are in the works to kind of allow for flexibility. But I would say it's inclusionary zoning is extremely important, but sometimes it sort of handcuffs folks in order and trying to work through the process and find ways to get it financed as is. And I would just say generally, if we could find a way to meet the requirement in a number of ways, no one solution fits all, I would say probably would speed things along. But generally the 3 years of these new construction projects, they go through quite a few reviews, like every large jurisdiction, as far as like getting things approved and what can actually be built. You have the two, GMU and Arrowbrook, for example, there are plenty of neighbors who have things to say about what gets built on those sites, and those processes take a long time.
Thanks. And I'd like to hear if anyone else has anything to say about that. But in the meantime, Jason, someone in the chat asked if you could share the article you referenced about converting office to affordable housing.
Sure. I think it was a BizNow email or something that I got this morning, but I'll
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks. Nick, did you have something to say?
I think it's important to mention that one of the reasons that finding land is so difficult for affordable housing, and one of the reasons that everybody on the panel here is looking for partners, whether they're the American Legion or a 501, standalone 501c3 or a faith-based organization, is patience. Because the process takes an incredibly long time, it becomes increasingly more difficult for an affordable housing developer to compete for just a standalone piece of ground, because in any market where there's true competition, the market rate developer can get to a closing and get to a built environment more quickly, just because of the financing requirements and the various processes we have to go through as an industry. So I think one of the reasons that we're having this conversation is just necessitated by finding patient, in some ways mission-driven owners of land who will ride the ride with you in a way that doesn't cost millions and millions of dollars in option payments and deposits and things that are often problematic for affordable developers. So,
and there's one more to pile on to Nick. I mean, as an example, that Ovation site, I mean, the charitable trust, the nonprofit, had competing offers submitted for that site to build market rate apartments that were substantially higher than ours, and we had to kind of explain to them that through a ground lease where they eventually get it back and they're meeting their affordability requirements and sort of meeting their published mission. I mean, a purely market rate developer who doesn't have that sort of mission is gonna like to hear that stuff, but they're gonna take the higher price and the speedier execution.
I guess I would just add, from my perspective, I sort of feel like it doesn't have to be this way. I mean, there should be a way that we don't have to use a general land use plan and a zoning and back-to-back processes the way we've been doing traditionally in a lot of places. It really drives up pre-development costs, land use costs, land use attorney costs, architecture costs, process costs, escalation, really challenging our local governments that are signing up for these aggressive and needed production goals for affordable housing as part of the Council of Governments, saying, why can't we green tape affordable housing, 100% affordable housing projects into a one-step process, right? There's no other way we're going to make it happen. And see, because time is money, and the more we manage to save on process, the more bang everyone's going to get out of these public monies that are going into the project. So I know we're looking at models in California and others and trying to bring them to Arlington and Fairfax and others as examples of, I think in California, they're looking now at ways to eliminate zoning if you're a faith-based group that, puts their hand up in the San Francisco area that you're willing to go into affordable housing. Well, if they can do it, why can't we do it here?
So our next question is actually for Carmen, and the question is, how can we encourage more of those VFW partnerships that you mentioned? And does APA have a standalone presentation of that Terwilliger project on your website? What is your sort of recommendation for how folks could continue to move those kind of relationships forward?
Absolutely. And I think now that the deal is closed, as of this year and underway and kind of on track, we have talked internally about trying to convene kind of a webinar and invite all those 200 kind of legions in the Commonwealth and others to attend, and have the post commanders and others participate and just kind of get the case study and see if we can generate some interest doing this elsewhere in the Commonwealth. And I will, certainly kind of keep VHA posted. Hopefully we can get some co-branding and the word out when we pull that together.
So going back to the fact that several of you highlighted deals you've done where you responded to RFPs, and these are RFPs being issued by entities that don't have other affordable housing or land assets necessarily. Can you talk a little bit about what that RFP process was like? Are these pretty sophisticated RFPs? What are the priorities that they're laying out in their RFPs? Is it cash flow? Is it long-term ownership and control? And then, flowing from that, what has been your experience in terms of negotiating those deal terms with those partners?
So I can speak to that a little bit. I mean, again, all of us have competed on many different types of RFPs, probably some of the same. And oftentimes, I mean, I think Enterprise has done an awesome job at educating the faith-based community about the opportunity for combining affordable housing with, their mission. And so they have, help to educate some of the churches and landowners, but also match them up with a lot of development consultants that specialize in this field as well. So they have representation of their own interest, as well as legal counsel and other consultants to help them, go through that discernment process to figure out if this is the right thing for them. That's extremely helpful for us as developers, because at least we know at that point that they're focused and committed to the project, and willing to become that patient partner throughout the process that we need to facilitate. So that's been one way. So many of the RFPs are developed because they have that level of expertise input. Some aren't. Some are more wide open, where they're looking for any and all ideas. And so in those cases, we can be competing with even different products, right? Like if they really aren't fully committed to affordable housing. And in that case, there's nothing, I'm not going to, develop market rate housing. So, that's not something, unless I partner with another market rate developer, that I can deliver for them. So there has to be that alignment of mission. I'm sorry, Erica, what was part 2 to your question? And maybe others can jump in on that one. I missed it. You're on mute.
I think that was great. That really covered it for me. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add? Okay. So I would be really curious to hear from some of you. Some of these deals are coming to you in the form of an RFP, although you've got to be on that list. You got to be in the know to see it. But how much of your time is spent finding maybe some of the deal arrangements that Jason referred to, which are deals where he's sort of approaching developers or property owners about partnerships? How much of your time is spent kind of seeking these things out?
I'll go first, and you guys can jump in after. I'd say over the last 2 or 3 years, maybe 10 or 15%, we had some fairly large things that were kind of in the legacy, type deals that we worked through. I would say in 2021 and going forward, we just came out of our kind of strategic, planning session. I would say upwards of 40 will just be for acquisition and looking for opportunities and that sort of thing. So organizationally, we're pushing hard to kind of come out of the COVID environment, hopefully, and kind of into the future with a much stronger acquisition and development platform regionally. So
yeah, and I would say, we have preservation, we do a lot of that too, but in Fairfax County specifically, actually everywhere in the DMV, new housing is required as well. So that's sort of, and to the point of this presentation, is there's not a lot of land. So we do, that is sort of one of our major focuses. We keep in constant communication with probably 5, 8, maybe 10 market rate developers in the area. Obviously with the county, we have in Fairfax a good track record of some successful developments. And so a lot of times folks it goes the other way too. Will reach out to us and say, hey, listen, you guys do a lot of these higher profile new construction deals here in the county. Can you help us look at how to but how to deliver our affordable units on a site that maybe required a proffer? So it kind of goes both ways. But I mean, to Nick's point, it's probably, we look at a lot that we don't do, obviously. So, I mean, we're probably looking at, for every one that shakes out, we probably looked at 15.
I totally align with what Nick and Jason just said. You've got to look at 10 deals to make one work. You really have to know your criteria, where can your skill set best align with the opportunity? Where does this fit in? You don't want to self-compete. There's a limited amount of 9% deals you can do in a certain year and not hit a developer cap. So you don't want to pick something up that's going to undermine something that you've already committed to. So there's a lot of those kind of conversations that need to happen when an opportunity comes in the door.
And so thinking about COVID, thinking about the recession, thinking about the industries that are impacted in the recession, have you been able to shift your acquisition strategy to capitalize on some of those things? Are you encountering issues like the amount of capital it would take, upfront capital it would take to do something like do an acquisition of a hotel, acquisition of defunct office space, to do a new deal? I'm wondering what you're all thinking about lately in light of what's happening in the market now.
All right. I would say sort of the most immediate impacts. I mean, it takes a while for all these things to kind of shake out, obviously, right? So all of the hotels and the retail space and everything is sort of starting to, I mean, it's suffering. And to see kind of where that's going to shake out and when those opportunities become available, I mean, I would say it's probably a longer lead time than even the 8 months that have passed since it all started. But I mean, generally speaking, the impacts we've had to date, I mean, we're doing ACC rehabs, which are, as noted earlier, hard to try and figure out ways to do those. Deals we're about to close, I mean, underwriting just keeps getting tighter and tighter when everyone's trying to kind of be conservative and plan and allow for it to take longer. The deal we're closing in a couple weeks it's gotten a lot tighter and a lot harder to get done. But I would say, I mean, generally, I think those opportunities will exist. I mean, the Sheraton in Tysons is for sale. If that's eventually, I don't know, it would be a gigantic affordable deal, but we can, they'll come.
You can go in on it.
Yeah.
I guess, yeah, I would add, I mean, we have started to look at some of those different asset classes and being able to do some adaptive reuse. Some of the challenges, I know people are talking about, the small strip malls, right? The commercial strip malls in Fairfax and other places. But, some of the challenges of those, you think that they're all owned by one owner and they're not. So then you're dealing with multiple owners, multiple, different acquisition strategies, and then of course the zoning challenges, what's on the land use plan and so forth. So longer term opportunities. The other thing I wanted to add, just in terms of COVID impacts, I talked about Culpeper and being able to finish up that last 10%, implementing new COVID protocols for to protect the residents that were there. I am hearing, because the banks are, and every day has evolved, and hopefully we're coming to a plateau here where we've, figured out we're going to have the vaccine and we're going to see the light at the end of the tunnel here. But commercial banks are getting a lot conservative about, the underwriting and how they're looking at this. And I know that for rehab jobs, they are talking about, putting in, not investing in them, right? Like not, being a part of a tenant in place rehabilitation, where really the risk, I guess in their opinion, isn't worth the reward. So, that's concern for us. And we do have a multi-building rehab job that's planned. And so we're, planning to empty out building by building. So we can expect to be able to implement proper COVID protocols to protect the residents. But it's a lot easier to do that in a new construction job with the construction worker protocols and just, what you need to do there versus when you have residents in place that you don't really have, control over their activities. So just another consideration.
Yeah.
So Eric, just the,
Top
the
of the
the
lot.
last thing I would mention is, so we have, while I work on the affordable side of our organization, we have a market rate side too, and we've been working kind of collaboratively to try to figure out how we can do both at the same time, how we can do market rate deals and affordable deals and get them to kind of coexist. And we're starting to come up with some really good ideas, nothing that we've, at least in this side of the country, that has come to fruition yet, but we're working on it, and it's hopefully it will be a solution that we can try to bring to the Commonwealth with this kind of glut of what folks are thinking of office redevelopment and retail redevelopment, et cetera. So maybe for next year's panel, we'll keep you posted.
Yeah, well, I think that takes us to the end of our panel, and I thank you so much. I thank you for sharing some of your secrets among friends, and I do look forward to hearing about what cool new deals you've got developed next year. So thank you, all four of you, very much.
Yes,
Thank you very much.
thank you so much to all of our panelists today for taking the time to join us and providing us with all this wonderful information. So it looks like we are going to take a quick break from the sessions until about 1 o'clock. And then from 1 to 1:45, there are actually 2 options for sessions that everyone can attend. The first is Structuring Creative and Durable Joint Ventures with David Bowers, Preston Lloyd, Matt Greason, and Orlando Artsy. And the second option is Year 15 Opportunities and the Enemy Within. Do you know who your partner is? And that's with Mike Vickers, Dave Davenport, Ellen Laurie Hoffman, and Bobby Rosen. So thank you again to our panelists, and I hope to see you all at the next session.
Thank you.